Hello, and welcome to our presentation, Florida Needs a Constitutional Right to Clean and Healthy Waters. I am Sean Bartelt, President of the League of Women Voters of Sarasota. Before we start, just so everyone knows, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit political organization. The League accepts both men and women as members. The League encourages informed and active participation in government through two functions. The first, which is non-political, is to educate the public because we believe the basis of a good government is an informed electorate. The second is political, when we advocate for positions on policy issues after careful study and consensus by our members. We keep the two functions separate. When we educate, we do not advocate. This event will be recorded and uploaded to our League of Women Voters Sarasota YouTube channel so that we can share this information with all those who are interested. Our presenter, Joseph Bonasia, is a retired teacher who currently serves as the chair for Florida Rights of Nature Network and Operations and Communications Director for Florida RightToCleanWater.org. Until recently, he also served as a citizens climate lobbyist volunteer liaison with Senator Rick Scott's office. He writes about constitutional environmental rights, climate change, and rights of nature. Joe will explain why Florida needs a constitutional right to clean water by showing the failure of our current regulatory system. He will discuss the purpose of the proposed Right to Clean and Healthy Water Amendment, explain with concrete examples how it can fix the system, and share how the League of Women Voters of Florida and all of our local chapters can help qualify the Right to Clean Water Amendment for the 2026 state ballot. Joe, I'm turning it over to you. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me to talk about our proposed amendment, constitutional right to clean and healthy waters for all Floridians. Elena, quick question for you. Did you think you already had a fundamental right to clean and healthy waters?
Yes, I did, Joe.
Well, most people do, but we do not. I remember when I first learned that we do not have it, I was sort of stunned. My jaw dropped. What do you mean we do not have a fundamental right to clean water? But we do not. In case you don't know, at the end of December, a Florida appellate court affirmed that fact. They said there is nothing in Florida general law or in our Constitution that grants citizens a right to waterways that exist, that flow, that are free of pollution, and that maintain a healthy ecosystem. Montana residents have that right. Pennsylvania residents have that right. New Yorkers have that right. We do not have that right here in Florida. Should we have that right? Well, obviously, I think we do. And I want to convince you of that fact. And I want to give you a way of doing so that you can share it with other people so that in 2 or 3 minutes time, you can persuasively explain to them why they should have this constitutional right. So let's say that you are fortunate enough to share a lake with your neighbor. Here's your property over here. Here's his or hers, and the lake is right smack in the middle. All the water that you and your family drink comes from that lake. You wash with it, you cook with it, you, your spouse, your kids, your grandchildren, you swim in it every day. You love looking at it. Hey, it's waterfront property. You enjoy, it's gratifying to see and to listen to the wildlife that the lake attracts and maintains. It is deeply gratifying to you that your children or grandchildren get to experience all this of the lake because, hey, this is part of the good life, living the good life here in Florida. And furthermore, the lake provides you with your livelihood, your income. You love to fish, you sell the fish you catch. Your quality of life for you and your family is wonderful. Then one day, your neighbor starts a business operation that pollutes the water of the lake. You get sick, your spouse gets sick, your kids or grandkids, because they're smaller and more vulnerable, get alarmingly sick. Your income decreases significantly because fish populations are decreasing significantly. They need clean and healthy waters to live in. And the quality of your life goes down as pollution levels go up. Shouldn't there be a law that protects your vital interests in the cleanliness and the health of that lake water? Our right to clean and healthy waters is such a law. But let's say there are laws. You got a bunch of laws written specifically to protect the quality of water in that lake, but your government isn't enforcing those laws. Shouldn't there be a law that enables you to hold your government accountable, to force it to enforce their own water quality laws, and thereby protect your vital interests? Right to clean and healthy waters is such a law. One more thing to consider. Let's say that you find out that your neighbor has been contributing lots and lots of money to the lawmakers. They, in turn, pass laws that benefit his or her commercial interests at the expense of your family's health, your economic well-being, and your quality of life. Shouldn't there be a law that you can use to protect you and your interests from this form of political corruption? Once again, that is what our Right to Clean and Healthy Waters constitutional amendment would do. That's why you should have it. It protects your vital interests, my vital interests, all Floridians' vital interests. Any questions? Well, then another question. Maybe our waters are in such good shape, we don't really have to worry about water quality or how clean and how healthy our waters are. If we were talking in person and we had a lot more time, I would call on Kathleen and I would say, Kathleen, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being terrible and 5 being great, what condition are our waters in? What do you think, Kathleen? 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, 5 being great.
Oh, I think we're probably 3.
Probably 3. Okay, Anne, you seem a little bit surprised. You think they're higher than that? You think they're better? Florida deserves a gold star?
Yes, it does, but our waters are not really as clean as they need to be.
True
But I
enough.
do have a question about something before. When you opened, you mentioned that there was a ruling or I guess a comment by a
There's a
judge about that.
Court
What-
ruling, yep.
Yeah, what lawsuit was filed that caused that ruling?
Okay, good question. A year or so ago, folks in Titusville, Florida, passed a local right to clean water law. They gave themselves a right to clean water because they were tired of their water quality problems and they lost faith in the government. Their city filed a lawsuit against them. Here, if 82% of the voters passed that law, but their city council did not want it enacted, they said it was unconstitutional. And it went through a few hearings. Finally, it went to the appellate court level. And that's where the appellate court affirmed Floridians do not have any right to clean and healthy waters, etc. Okay? So I want to start sharing my screen because I want to start sharing some facts with you so you can appreciate just what is the quality of our waters here in Florida. So we have 50,000 tons of legacy phosphorus sitting at the bottom of Lake Okeechobee, giving rise to blue-green algae blooms. Hundreds of square miles every year in the lake. And when they release water, it ends up fouling our Caloosahatchee River, St. Lucie Richer, and that sort of stuff. So blue-green algae blooms make people sick short term, and potentially long-term, causing neurodegenerative diseases. Red tides, in case you don't know, have exploded in Florida in the last 30 years. We've had over 200 months of red tide in Florida, more months with than without. And aside from giving people respiratory problems and making it very unpleasant at the beach, well, it is the source of massive fish die-offs at times. Our seagrass beds are on the brink of a death spiral. We have lost tens of thousands of acres of seagrass over the last decade or so. It's a prime reason why we had a historic loss of manatees within the last few years. They primarily feed on seagrass. They're starving to death. We have nearly 1 million acres of estuaries and 9,000 miles of rivers and streams contaminated with fecal bacteria. We've got 1,000 springs. 800 of them are impaired. No state has more acres of polluted lake water than does Florida. No state has lost more acres of wetlands than has Florida. 9.3 million acres to date. Obviously, our regulatory system isn't working. It's not doing the job of protecting our waters that it's supposed to be doing. So the question is, why isn't it working? If we were in person, we had time, I would again be calling upon people, but I'm just going to keep on going here in the name of time. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anybody to say that special interests here in Florida have undue influence over our environmental policy. If you would like very concrete examples about how big agriculture, big mining, or big development have had unhealthy influence on our policy, we can get into that in the Q&A. Right now, I'll just bring one critical example. And this has to do with what happened in Orange County in 2020. They did something absolutely historic. Again, those folks, like those in Titusville, tired of their polluted waters, having lost faith in our regulatory system to protect and clean them up, they passed a county charter. They gave rights to their water bodies, rights to exist, flow, be free of pollution, and they gave every citizen a right to clean water. Eventually, 89% of the voters there passed it, 9 out of 10 voters. Unfortunately, our legislature very quickly stepped in and they took those rights away. And they did that by preempting the authority of local governments to pass laws granting rights to any aspect to the natural world, or to grant citizens any rights to any aspect of the natural world. That means no clean air, no healthy climate, no clean water. They do not want us to have that right. So this preemption taught us 2 things. One, they must really fear how effective a rights-based approach to environmental protection would be, or else they would not have gone to this extent to undermine those laws. And number 2, it told us, okay, if they're not going to allow us to clean up our waters, to take care of our waters at the local level, then we have to go over their heads. We have to amend our state constitution. This was not our original mission. It was to work locally. They forced our hand. So, where are we at in the presentation over here? I gave you a little introductory illustration. We've established that the system definitely is not working. In my remaining time, I want to jump into specifics about the amendment, what it says, what it does. I want all League of Women Voters who are out there tabling being able to answer the most frequently asked questions. And then we'll discuss absolute campaign basics. So, Right to Clean and Healthy Waters, we are a citizen initiative. I'll let you know that there are 19 other states in the nation pursuing constitutional environmental rights. All of them are going through their state legislatures. We do not have that option here, which is why we are pursuing it through a citizens initiative. This is what it says. Clean and healthy waters promote important public interests, including health, prosperity, and quality of life, and it takes the time to list some of those public interests. Clean drinking water, scenic beauty and recreational activities. Many of us are down here because we love looking at the water, being in the water, on the water, fishing the water, swimming the water. It's a quality of life issue, a very, very important one. Fishing is a way of life down here in Florida. It's also a huge industry. It's a $15 billion industry, but it will suffer when fish populations suffer because they do not do well in polluted water. And I believe Floridians we cherish our wildlife here, whether it's fish or dolphins or eagles or what. Well, thriving populations, diverse communities of wildlife, they depend on clean and healthy waters. Wetlands are part of our waters. They provide us with a great deal of aquatic services, and especially now when we have had and are expecting more monstrous storms, they provide us with vital storm protection. Our economic interest and business opportunities are based on the quality of our water. Down here in Southwest Florida, an economic study was done, and what it did was determine just what would the economic impact be if here in Collier County, Lee, and Charlotte County, we had another red tide event and blue-green algae bloom like we had back a few years ago. Well, we'd be talking 43,000 jobs, nearly $18 billion in lost property values, $8 billion in a value of outdoor recreation. Our economy, it's absolutely dependent on clean and healthy waters. So the purpose of this amendment is to advance these public interests by creating an enforceable fundamental right to clean and healthy waters. We're quoting right from the full text of the amendment here. This authorizes a person to sue for equitable relief when a state executive agency, by action or inaction, allows harm or threat of harm to Florida waters. By action or inaction. An action could be, here you go, here's a permit to build in those wetlands over there. Inaction would be not enforcing current water quality laws. So we have this fundamental right. With this right, we can hold our state agencies accountable for harm or threat of harm to our waters. I want you to give you an example of the potential of a constitutional environmental right. I hope that many of you are familiar with what happened recently in the last year or so. These are 16 very happy young Montanans. That's because they just won an historic case here. On Montana books, there was a law that said that their DEP could not take greenhouse gases into consideration and the impact upon the climate when issuing permits to fossil fuel companies. These young people said, well, that is only going to aggravate the climate crisis. They proved that they're already being impacted by the climate crisis. And they said, this law is unconstitutional because here in Montana, we have a constitutional right to a healthy environment. And that is because back in 1972, Montana voters voted to amend their constitution. They gave themselves this environmental right. This is the only climate case to date in the United States that has been successful. And that's because it's based on this constitutional right. It's not the only state, Pennsylvania. And there was a very, very important case in Pennsylvania. It had to do with fracking. It went all the way up to their Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that a particular pro-fracking legislation was unconstitutional because it violated Pennsylvanians' constitutional environmental rights. The Chief Justice made this point in the ruling. It is not a historic accident that the Pennsylvania Constitution now places citizens' environmental rights on par with their political rights. The political rights he's referring to are those that you and I know, we hear about them every day. Their fundamental rights to freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to bear arms, all those fundamental rights that are critical to our well-being as Americans. These Pennsylvanians said, well, so are our environmental rights. Here in Florida, we want the same level of protection that Pennsylvania citizens have, that Montana citizens have, and that New York citizens have. So exactly what does our amendment say and do? I'm going to put this in down-to-earth English. What it says is that if any of our agencies are going to permit harm to any of our waters, they must have a compelling state interest for doing so. Something, somehow, more important to public interests than what clean and healthy waters means to us. There are very few things that can rise to that level. That's why I just went through the trouble of listing all those vital interests that we have in clean and healthy waters. There are occasions when there is a compelling state interest. I'll share an example with you in a moment. But even when there is, then the agencies must limit harm to no more than what is necessary to meet that public interest, and then no more. Do not cause excessive harm. If we think they are, then they are in violation of our constitutional right. And like in Pennsylvania, or like in Montana, with this fundamental right, we can then take the agencies to court. We present our evidence, we make our case. The court looks at the information, scientific information is given preference, and then it makes a ruling. And it can turn around and it could order the agency to stop being in violation of the people's right, stop the harm to our waters. Agencies must comply. There was a lawsuit there was a case in New York, and the judge said, agencies do not have the discretion to ignore the state constitution when they want. You must do this. So that is it in a nutshell. If they're going to harm our waters, they must have a really, really good reason, something more important than what clean and healthy waters means to us. If not, we get to take them to court and we can hold them accountable. Let me give you a concrete example that affects millions of Floridians. Lake Okeechobee. The green water on the left is the Gulf. That yucky brown stuff is water that came from Lake Okeechobee released down the Caloosahatchee River. If they release water down to where I live, Cape Coral, we could file an action against them to stop the releases because they're harming our waters down here. The court, we wouldn't do that because we know the court wouldn't agree, because there is a compelling state interest here. If you let water level in Okeechobee, Lake Okeechobee get too high, then you risk flooding surrounding communities. We're not going to do that, so we can't release the water. However, the second part of the amendment kicks in, the quality of the water. There are 32 water basins around Lake Okeechobee currently not meeting water quality standards. Some of those pollution levels are 20 times higher than what laws allow. What is the compelling state interest for permitting that much pollution? Our agencies would have to make their case. The bottom line profits for industries is not a compelling state interest. The court turns around and says, okay, state agencies, stop polluting the lake. Stop the harm. So much of what we hear, billions of dollars being spent to clean up the water before we send it south. How much do you hear about stopping the pollution at the source? This law can do that. Another very important example has to do with wetlands. I'm sure you know that we are not practicing the sort of smart, sustainable growth in Florida that we should be. Wetlands are still being built on at too great a pace and scale. And just a few years ago, our Supreme Court changed the definition of U.S. waters, and they opened up millions of acres of wetlands to harm and development and such. If we had our right to clean and healthy waters, development in wetlands would be unconstitutional. It's obviously causing harm to these wetlands. This is a legal tool to draw a line and say, no, we're building in wetlands. I don't have the example right here, but I'm going to give you one more because it was kind of notorious. It had to do with the Ginny Springs case. There was a water bottle company that got a permit to suck 1 million gallons of water a day out of Ginny Springs. Close to 20,000 citizens recorded comments, the vast majority arguing against that. It made no difference. The permit was issued. The water bottler only had to pay a one-time fee of $115 and gets to take, jaws drop, and gets to take up to 1 million gallons of water a day. What is the compelling state interest for that? The water levels in our springs are down 1/3. So, let you know, there are a lot of organizations, such as the League of Women Voters, who appreciate the great need and the potential effectiveness of our amendment, and they are supporting us. You could see just a few of them listed down there: Friends of the Everglades, Vote Water, a number of water keepers groups, etc. Frequently asked questions. So you know what to say if you're out there tabling. Here's the most common one. Won't this amendment lead to a proliferation of lawsuits all over the place? No. And we know that because it hasn't happened in Pennsylvania and Montana and New York. There's no reason to believe that it is going to happen here. That sort of goes along with this. Won't it be a field day for lawyers? They're going to see big dollar signs and they're going to come rushing in with lawsuits. Not going to happen. That's because the lawsuits aren't about damages. If we file a lawsuit and we win, the court doesn't say, okay, here you go. Joe and Kathleen and Elena, you guys get $5 million. That's not what the court says. The court says, okay, the waters are being harmed. Department of Environmental Protection, stop the harm. That's what these lawsuits are about, stopping the harm. I don't know if you'd be surprised, but what I've seen is there's a significant level of cynicism among Florida voters. Hey, we've done this. We've gone down this road before. We've passed amendments only to see the legislature defy the will of the people, pull the rug out from underneath whatever the amendment was. Well, the attorneys who wrote this, and it took a long, long time to craft the language of this. Some of our best environmental lawyers helped write the amendment to protect against that. Just two quick things. A lot of those other things were not fundamental rights amendments, and they were not self-executing, which means that they needed the legislature to pass other laws to get it to implement them. Not this. On the day that voters pass it, it's law, it's in effect. Don't we already have enough laws to protect our waters? This one especially surprises me. If we had enough laws to protect our waters, wouldn't they be in much, much better shape than they are now? We very evidently do not. This gets back to needing a law that enables you to hold our government accountable and make them enforce its own water quality laws. So, campaign basics. We need 900,000 signed and approved petitions by the end of this year. We launched right around Earth Day, 2024. When we get to 223,000 verified petitions, that triggers a Supreme Court review, but that review doesn't happen until April of 2026. after the petition gathering period is over. We are strictly grassroots citizens petition initiative. We have not paid a single person to collect a petition. We're not doing the paid petition gatherer route. We are relying on volunteers. Our volunteers, your volunteers, volunteers from other organizations. If we had 1,000 people getting 20 petitions a week, there's our million petitions right there. If we have 2,000 going out there and getting only 10 per week, well, you've still got the million. We need boots on the ground. We need people. Nothing is as effective as one person standing in front of another and saying, hey, would you help us sign, would you help and sign this petition to give yourself and all Floridians a right to clean water? It doesn't take long to persuade them to sign. Few people say, no, I don't want a right to clean water. We don't hear that. The other way for people to sign petitions, they go to our website, they can print it out, they fill it out, sign it, date it, and mail it in. Unfortunately, not enough people are willing to take the time and effort to do that. We are employing a new tool that helps out in that regard when you cannot be, standing right in front of somebody. What this is a link. It's a tool that enables people to request in about 2 minutes a pre-filled petition emailed to them. It's got full name, full address, voter registration number. Almost everything is filled out. All they have to do is sign their signature, date it, and mail it in. We need that link posted all over the place. And I would ask everyone on this call, I would ask every single member of League of Women Voters, share that link via email with 5 people you know. Just commit to that. Tell them, hey, this is really good. I recommend you sign it. If you sign it, they will do it. We had 120,000 signed petitions last election cycle. If every one of those 120,000 people got 5 other people, now we're at 700,000, and we are tasting victory. So I went through a lot of information very quick. In my mind, some of the most important of that was the first 3 minutes with that little story about sharing a lake. And shouldn't you have a law to protect your vital interests? But people can very easily go to our website. We've got lots of information. We've got great FAQs for those people who want to dig down deeper, general FAQs, legal FAQs, ways they can help. They could register their commitment. It's a really exceptional website. But the bottom line is we are a numbers game. We need 900,000 signed petitions by the end of this year. I should note recently that there are potential threats to the citizens initiative process. Are you guys familiar with that? You know what Governor DeSantis has proposed recently? Okay, so
Yes.
we don't know that. Yep. So the legislature might not be inclined to give Governor DeSantis everything he wants. That remains to be seen. But there is no stopping for us. Everything's got to be full force. Get petitions, get petitions, get petitions. So I will stop there and open this up to any questions.
Mary? Mary asked in the chat, how do we define clean and healthy water? Are there standards that are established for that?
Yes. So there is a full text of the amendment. It's about 1.5 pages long, and it defines lots of key keywords, key concepts. It defines what constitutes harm to our waters. It also lists what waters are, from aquifers to wetlands and everything in between. It's an exhaustive list.
Thank you. I also was going to bring up the proposal by Governor DeSantis to stop citizen initiatives.
Mhm.
That seems like a big threat to a lot of different things, but in particular this, if it gets passed.
If it gets passed. So the legislature seems to be pushing back. He wanted this dealt with during the special session. They said no. Some of the political leaders, I think they value the citizen petition initiative, and they'll be protective of it. I think they're going to give him some of the things he wants. I think he wants nine changes made. So we don't know just what the impact will be. We have to wait and see. But I think there are other efforts. We're not doing it. Other efforts are out there to protect the process. So we'll just have to see.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Sean had mentioned in her introduction that this movement is part of a larger right to nature movement in the country. Can you tell us a little something about that?
Yep, there is a rights of nature movement in the country. It began back in the 1970s with a court case involving the Sierra Club and some developer who wanted to build something huge and destructive in some beautiful place out west. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. At that time, a lawyer wrote a legal brief called "Should Trees Have Standing?" And he made the case that, hey, aspects of nature should have standing in court. Well, that didn't ride well with the court that day, but one of the justices, William O. Douglas, said, yes, I think we should. Let's explore this. So since then, there has been movement. You might recall that a few years ago, there was a Lake Erie Bill of Rights. Some Pennsylvania towns have passed rights of nature laws. So in Orange County, they passed that rights of nature law. At that time, they were the largest jurisdiction in the country to have passed a law. But we see what our legislature did. They did the same thing the Ohio legislature did. They came and they took away the authority of local governments to pass laws like that. I would say outside the United States, the rights of nature movement is stronger. I think it's Ecuador who actually has a rights of nature clause in its constitution, national constitution. But I want to make it clear here that this right to clean and healthy waters is not giving any rights to any aspect of the natural world. In Florida, if you are going to amend the state constitution, you must do so in a very narrowly defined single subject. If we had said we want to give rights to nature and we want to give rights to people to clean and healthy waters, the state Supreme Court would say, nope, now you're doing two subjects, two things. They bounced the proposed amendment and we'd have to start from scratch. And from my point of view, in some ways, this amendment is a more effective amendment to bring change, positive change to our waters and to change the system. Rights of nature is a goal down the line, but this one is much more attainable much sooner. Elena?
Thank you. My question is very simple, really, but I'm thinking about, so we could say this is not really going to cost any money if it's passed. Is that correct? Am I thinking it through? I mean, to the taxpayers, I'm not going to have to be taxed any additional money if this becomes a constitutional amendment in Florida.
No, you're not going to be taxed more money. And what I would add to the perspective of this here is, look how many billions of dollars taxpayers are paying now because of polluted water. Clean water is better for us. How many billions have we lost, not just to clean it up, but we've lost economically? I shared some of those facts with you earlier, and that was just 3 counties down here in Southwest Florida. Clean water is a boost to the economy, and it's good for taxpayers.
And I would say, I mean, potentially there are costs because, say, for instance, something that Sarasota County did, what, more than a decade ago, was to get rid of septic tanks because they eventually drain into the bay, and to have a, much more sophisticated sewage management treatment system. The east coast of Florida with the Indian River never did that. So you have all these septic tanks draining into the river, which creates the growth of stuff that prevents the seagrass from growing, that then leads to
Yep.
the manatees dying. And I mean, it's a big area for shrimping and everything else. So the cost would probably be requiring that counties implement things
Yep.
that Sarasota County did a
So
long,
there-
long time
yes.
ago.
There is a cost, and that would be expensive, the whole septic tank issue. But it doesn't mean necessarily that taxpayers are going to end up paying more money. Right now, the state is sitting on what, $20 billion in surplus? And how many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars has the federal government made available for this transition from septic to sewer? So there's money there to pay for this. There's
So
something
any
else I wanna-
other questions?
I do want to bring something to me vitally important here, because some of these questions are short-term in perspective. This right isn't just for our current generations, it is for future generations of Floridians. And there are lots of people who are concerned that the Florida 20, 25, 30 years from now is going to be vastly different than the one that we are enjoying now, and we're seeing deteriorate at too fast a scale. We cannot just be worried about ourselves. It's our children, it's our grandchildren. We have a responsibility to them.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Joe, for the incredible presentation. It was very, very informative, and I certainly have a much deeper understanding of the proposed amendment, and I thank you very much for your time. Elena, any other closing comments from our events co-chair?
No, just we do really appreciate your time and hope that people will take this very seriously. And, it can be a very simple way to get additional signatures that are needed. And hopefully there won't be other, blocks in the way of getting a constitutional amendment on the ballot. So thank you very much. And I know you've put in lots and lots and lots of hours in getting this going. So we appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for having me here tonight.
Mhm.
It's a
Thank you.
privilege. Everybody have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.